Empire of Glass. Chapter 1. Rain streaked the glass walls of the 48th floor, turning the Manhattan skyline into blurred silver and gold beyond the executive boardroom of Vale and Locke Technologies. Inside, nobody moved. Not the senior partners seated along the polished black conference table. Not the legal team standing near the back wall pretending not to panic. Not even Daniel Locke himself, co-founder and notorious second-in-command, whose usual instinct in a crisis was aggression disguised as charm. The only sound came from the quiet click of a presentation remote in Adrian Vale's hand. Red numbers glowed across 6 enormous monitors. Projected losses, collapsed acquisition forecasts, a market correction severe enough to wipe almost $3 billion from the company's valuation before opening bell. Evelyn Mercer stood near the far end of the room with a legal pad clutched against her ribs and tried to breathe normally. She wasn't supposed to be here. Technically, junior financial analysts did not attend emergency executive meetings at midnight, especially not analysts who had been with the company for less than 4 months and still flinched every time someone mentioned shareholder optics. But her direct supervisor had dragged her upstairs 30 minutes ago after discovering the revised Singapore acquisition model sitting in his inbox. Now he looked like he regretted ever learning her name. "Walk me through it again," one board member demanded sharply, because these numbers suggest the entire Southeast Asia expansion was built on inflated user growth projections. "It was," Evelyn said quietly before anyone else could answer. The room shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. A few heads turned. Someone exhaled under their breath. At the center of the table, Adrian Vale remained completely still, which was somehow worse. Evelyn had seen him exactly twice before tonight. Once during onboarding, when he'd crossed the lobby surrounded by executives and security with the cold efficiency of a man who existed in 15-minute increments. The second time from across an investor summit where women in couture dresses and men worth hundreds of millions had tracked his movements like gravity worked differently around him. He had never looked at her directly. Right now, she was grateful for that. Daniel Locke scrubbed a hand through his dark blonde hair. "What Evelyn means is that the original dataset came from projections supplied by Caraway Analytics. They were wrong," Evelyn interrupted. Her supervisor shot her a horrified look. The boardroom went silent again. Adrian finally spoke, his voice low and even. "How wrong?" Every instinct told Evelyn to soften it, to make it survivable. But she'd spent the last 6 years watching powerful people survive consequences that destroyed everyone beneath them. She was tired of watching rooms full of executives pretend numbers were feelings instead of facts. She lifted her chin slightly. The acquisition model assumes a 38% growth rate over 18 months. Her voice steadied as she continued. Actual market behavior suggests closer to 11. A long pause. One of the board members laughed once in disbelief. "That's impossible." "No," Evelyn said. "It's inconvenient." Daniel closed his eyes briefly like he was already planning his resignation. Across the table, Adrian Vale looked up for the first time. The effect was immediate and deeply unfair. He wasn't merely attractive. Men like him usually weren't. They were polished into something colder than beauty, precision sharpened into human form. Dark suit without a wrinkle, white shirt open once at the throat, lean hands resting loosely near the tablet in front of him. Controlled posture, controlled expression, controlled everything. But his eyes were terrifyingly attentive. Evelyn suddenly understood why billion-dollar negotiations tended to end in his favor. He studied her for exactly 3 seconds. Not her body, not her face, her, like he was assessing structural integrity. "What's your name?" he asked. She hated that her pulse reacted to his attention. "Evelyn Mercer." "And you revised the model personally?" "Yes. Without authorization." There it was. The execution. Oddly, relief flickered through her. At least this part she understood. Consequences made sense. Numbers made sense. Men like Adrian Vale firing people like her made perfect sense. "Yes," she admitted. One of the senior executives leaned forward immediately. "Adrian, with respect, this was completely outside protocol." We can handle the disciplinary side after legal reviews. How long have you known? Adrian asked Evelyn, ignoring him entirely. 3 days. And your supervisor? A beat too long passed. Beside her, Martin Green visibly paled. Evelyn could practically hear the calculations happening around the room. Protect yourself. Protect the chain of command. Protect the stock price. She swallowed carefully. He wanted more time to verify the data. It wasn't technically a lie. Martin looked at her with naked gratitude. Adrian noticed that too. Of course he did. The silence stretched while rain tapped softly against the windows high above the city. Then Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair. Show me. Confusion rippled around the room. Evelyn blinked. Sorry. The corrected model. His gaze stayed fixed on her. Calm. Direct. Unless you'd prefer someone else explain your work for you. Heat climbed unexpectedly up her spine. Challenge. Not flirtation. Nothing remotely close to it, which somehow affected her more. Daniel Locke let out a quiet breath that sounded dangerously close to amusement. Well, he murmured. This should be interesting. Evelyn stepped toward the monitors before she could think better of it. Her shoes suddenly felt too cheap for the room. The coffee stain on her sleeve felt glaringly obvious beneath the recessed lighting. But once the numbers appeared on screen, instinct took over. This section here, she said, pulling up revised forecasting curves, assumes consumer retention based on pandemic-era digital acceleration, but regional spending already plateaued 2 quarters ago. She heard movement behind her, chairs shifting, attention sharpening, so she kept going, confident now, precise, every correction backed with data, every projection defendable. For 10 uninterrupted minutes, nobody spoke. When she finally finished, the boardroom sat in stunned silence. Evelyn slowly lowered the presentation remote. One board member looked furious. Another looked sick. Daniel Locke looked fascinated. But Adrian looked thoughtful, which felt strangely more dangerous than anger. He steepled his fingers once beneath his chin. If these projections are accurate, he said calmly, the Caraway acquisition team either failed basic due diligence or intentionally manipulated growth visibility. Nobody answered, because everyone understood what that accusation meant. Fraud, shareholder exposure, regulatory disaster, a media bloodbath. The stock market opened in less than 7 hours. Adrian's gaze shifted briefly toward the legal team. Prepare containment scenarios, then operations. Freeze external communications until I approve them personally. Then finally back to Evelyn. Come with me. Her stomach dropped. The room immediately became interested in pretending not to listen. Martin Green cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Vale, I can take over from here. No, Adrian said simply. Not louder. Not sharper. Worse. Certain. He stood, and the atmosphere in the room changed with the subtle violence of pressure systems colliding. People moved automatically around him. Screens dimmed. Assistants straightened. Executives reached for phones. Power didn't follow Adrian Vale. It anticipated him. Evelyn scrambled to collect her notebook before following him out of the boardroom and into the silent executive corridor beyond. The doors closed behind them with a muted hiss. For the first time all night, there was no audience. Just polished black floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. And the billionaire CEO striding beside her in silence. Evelyn became acutely aware that she might have just destroyed her career. Adrian pressed the private elevator button. You protected your supervisor, he said without looking at her. The observation caught her off guard. He made a mistake, she answered carefully. Not a malicious one. The elevator doors slid open. Adrian stepped inside first. Most people, he said quietly, become very honest when they think someone else is about to lose power. Evelyn hesitated only a second before entering after him. The doors closed. The city vanished behind mirrored steel walls. And suddenly the space felt much too small. Adrian loosened one cuff with deliberate calm, his expression unreadable beneath the muted overhead lights. Then he finally looked directly at her again. "You're either exceptionally intelligent," he said, "or catastrophically reckless." Evelyn met his gaze despite the violent rhythm of her pulse. "Can't I be both?" For the first time that night, something almost resembling amusement flickered briefly in his eyes. Then the elevator began to descend. Chapter 2. Adrian Vale disliked elevators. Not because of claustrophobia. He had long ago trained himself out of weaknesses that could be exploited. He disliked them because elevators forced stillness. Stillness invited observation. And observation, in Adrian's experience, complicated things, especially when the woman standing 3 feet away from him had just dismantled a billion-dollar acquisition with more composure than half his executive board. The mirrored walls reflected Evelyn Mercer from every angle. Dark hair pulled back too quickly, exhaustion faint beneath her eyes, cheap flats damp from the rain outside, coffee stain fading across the cuff of her pale blouse. Nothing about her matched the executive floor, which made her presence there more interesting, not less. Most ambitious employees performed intelligence like theater around powerful people. They over-explained, over-smiled, positioned themselves carefully in rooms where they hoped to be noticed. Evelyn had walked into a boardroom full of predators and volunteered information that could have destroyed her career. Without flinching, Adrian adjusted the silver cuff at his wrist slowly. "Can't I be both?" The answer replayed in his head longer than it should have. Reckless and intelligent. Possibly. But what unsettled him was the honesty of it. The elevator descended in silence for another few seconds before Evelyn spoke again. "Am I fired?" Direct. No trembling voice. No attempt to charm him. Just the question. Adrian glanced toward her reflection instead of her face. "Do you think you should be?" "That depends whether Vale and Locke values accuracy more than hierarchy." Interesting. Most employees learned very quickly that hierarchy was the true operating system of every corporation on Earth, no matter what slogans appeared in investor presentations. You bypassed 3 levels of authorization because they were wrong. And if your analysis had been wrong, then you would have fired me. Again, immediate, certain. Adrian felt the faintest pull of something dangerously close to respect. The elevator doors opened onto the private executive level. Unlike the floors below, this one was silent. No assistants rushing between offices. No analysts hovering near glass conference rooms. No late-night support staff pretending not to overhear billion-dollar conversations. Only soft recessed lighting, dark marble floors, and the distant hum of Manhattan beyond the windows. Evelyn followed him cautiously down the corridor, her posture controlled despite the tension he could practically feel radiating from her. She expected punishment. Reasonable. Most people who entered Adrian's office expecting mercy usually misunderstood him completely. He pushed open the door to his private office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city from nearly 50 stories up. The skyline glowed through the rain in fractured gold and white. Bookshelves lined one wall beside a built-in bar no one touched except Daniel. A black Steinway piano sat near the windows, mostly ignored these days. Evelyn noticed the piano immediately. People always did. Adrian loosened his tie as he crossed toward his desk. "Sit." She remained standing. "I'm fine." He looked at her then. Actually looked. There was stubbornness in the set of her shoulders. Defensive instinct carefully disguised as professionalism. She held herself like someone accustomed to instability, the kind that taught people to remain prepared for humiliation at all times. And yet she still argued with board members twice her age. Curious. Adrian set his phone face down on the desk. That wasn't a suggestion. A flicker of irritation crossed her face before she sat in one of the leather chairs opposite him. Good. Fear would have been easier to manage. He opened the revised acquisition files on his tablet while she watched him carefully from across the desk. "You rebuilt the entire forecast alone?" "Yes. In 3 days. I didn't sleep much." No self-pity in the answer, just fact. Rain moved softly against the windows behind her. Somewhere downtown, lights shifted across the river in blurred ribbons of gold. Adrian studied the model again. The corrections were meticulous. elegant even, not just mathematically accurate, strategically intelligent. She hadn't simply found errors. She understood market psychology, consumer behavior, timing pressure, investor reactions. That level of instinct was rare. At 39, Adrian trusted very few people intellectually. At the moment, the list became unexpectedly shorter. "Who trained you?" he asked. Evelyn blinked slightly at the question. "What? You think like someone with more experience than your resume suggests." A pause. Then, carefully, "My father taught economics at Columbia before he died." Something in her voice changed around the last few words. Compressed. Adrian recognized that tone. Grief refined into functionality. When was that? 5 years ago. Young for that kind of loss. Too young. He ignored the unwelcome thought immediately. Personal sympathy clouded judgment. Adrian had built an empire specifically by refusing emotional interference. "Still, you support someone financially," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? The overtime, the exhaustion, the refusal to lose your job despite openly challenging executives." His voice remained calm. People tolerate impossible environments for 2 reasons: ambition or necessity. A quiet beat passed. Then Evelyn leaned back slightly in the chair, studying him with new caution. "You profile employees often?" "Constantly." "That sounds unhealthy." A surprising response. Most people became intimidated when Adrian analyzed them directly. Evelyn looked annoyed by it instead. Against his better judgment, he almost smiled. "Almost. My younger brother's in med school," she admitted finally. "I help pay tuition." There it was. Necessity. Adrian looked down briefly at the numbers on his tablet again. He'd grown up around wealth substantial enough to distort reality. Old money, political access, the kind of privilege that insulated people from consequences until they became convinced consequences only existed for others. Then his father lost almost everything. And Adrian learned exactly how quickly power disappeared when money did. Interesting how some instincts never left you, no matter how wealthy you became afterward. His phone buzzed sharply against the desk. "Daniel Locke." Adrian answered without taking his eyes off Evelyn. "Yes. We have a problem," Daniel said immediately. No humor now. "Caraway's legal team just requested an emergency call with shareholders." Of course they did. Move fast enough and truth struggled to keep pace with narrative. "When?" 20 minutes. Adrian's gaze sharpened slightly. Too fast. Which meant either panic or preparation. "Get me every communication they've sent internally over the last 6 months." "Already pulling them." Daniel paused. Then, more carefully, "You trust the analyst?" Across the desk, Evelyn sat perfectly still. Adrian looked directly at her. "Yes," he said. The silence on the other end of the call lasted half a second too long. Then Daniel laughed softly under his breath. "Well," he murmured, "that's new." The line disconnected. Evelyn stared at Adrian across the desk. "You barely know me. I know your numbers are right." "That's not the same thing." "No, it wasn't." Adrian stood and crossed toward the windows overlooking the city. The skyline spread endlessly beneath the rain. Expensive, electric, restless. Control, optics, leverage. Every empire was built from the same materials eventually. Behind him, Evelyn spoke carefully. "You think someone manipulated the projections intentionally?" "Not a question." Adrian slid one hand into his pocket. "I think people become creative when billions of dollars are involved. And if you're right," he turned slightly toward her, "then tomorrow morning becomes very unpleasant for several powerful people." For the first time since entering his office, Evelyn looked uncertain. Not frightened exactly, just aware of scale, of consequences, of the fact that the room she'd stepped into tonight operated by entirely different rules than the rest of the world. Adrian watched realization settle behind her eyes. Then her phone buzzed suddenly in her bag. She startled slightly, clearly not expecting it. "Answer it," Adrian said. She hesitated before pulling out the phone. The screen illuminated her expression instantly. Concern. "Everything okay?" Adrian asked. "My brother." She stood automatically. Sorry, I just need to take this." She moved toward the hallway quickly, already answering. "Ethan?" Adrian looked away, intending to give privacy instinctively. Then he heard the panic in the young male voice even from several feet away, and watched all the color drain from Evelyn Mercer's face. "Slow down," she said sharply. "What happened?" A pause. Then, "No, don't let them discharge her until I get there." Adrian's attention sharpened immediately. Hospital. Bills. Fear. Evelyn pressed a hand briefly against her forehead. "I'm coming now." The call ended. For one controlled second, she simply stood there trying to reorganize herself back into professionalism. It almost worked. Then she looked up. "I'm sorry," she said tightly. "My mother. I have to leave." Adrian studied her. The strain around her eyes. The instinctive apology. The immediate expectation that choosing family over work required permission. Something cold moved quietly through his chest. Not emotion. Recognition. "Go," he said. Relief flickered across her face so quickly she probably didn't realize he saw it. She grabbed her bag immediately. "I can send the remaining files remotely tonight." "Evelyn." She paused near the door. Adrian held her gaze steadily. "Your job is not in danger." The words landed harder than he intended. He saw it immediately in her expression. Shock first, then suspicion, as if kindness from powerful men always arrived attached to invisible terms. Interesting and dangerous, because for the first time in a very long time, Adrian found himself wanting to prove otherwise. Evelyn nodded once slowly. "Thank you." Then she disappeared into the corridor beyond his office. The door closed softly behind her. Silence returned. Rain against glass. City lights below. The low hum of climate control through the penthouse-level offices of a billion-dollar empire preparing for war. Adrian looked down at the revised acquisition files still open across his desk. Then at the elevator doors where Evelyn had vanished moments earlier. Daniel was right. This was new. Chapter 3. By the time Evelyn reached Midtown General, rain had soaked through the hem of her coat and turned Manhattan into a blur of headlights and wet pavement. The emergency room smelled like antiseptic, stale coffee, and exhaustion. Too bright, too loud, too familiar. She spotted her younger brother immediately near the admissions desk, pacing in wrinkled scrubs with both hands shoved into his dark hair. Ethan looked up the second he saw her. Relief hit his face so hard it almost hurt to look at. "She's asking for you," he said quickly. Evelyn exhaled shakily for the first time since leaving Vale Locke Technologies. "What happened?" "They think it's stress-related complications." Ethan scrubbed a hand over his face. "She collapsed at work." Guilt moved through Evelyn fast and sharp. 3 jobs between them. Endless bills. Their mother pretending she was still capable of 12-hour shifts because the alternative terrified her. "How bad?" "They stabilized her." His voice lowered. "But they won't discharge her tonight." Which meant money. Always money. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Hospital stays. Medication adjustments. More testing. She already knew exactly how little remained in her checking account. "You shouldn't have come straight from work," Ethan said quietly, noticing her expression. "You look exhausted." She almost laughed. Instead, she leaned against the admissions counter for one dangerous second. "I may have accidentally started a corporate civil war tonight." Ethan blinked. "What?" "Long story. Please tell me you didn't get fired." "I don't think so." "Not think so." The uncertainty of that sat heavily in her chest, because she still couldn't quite process the look Adrian Vale had given her before she left his office. "Your job is not in danger." Most powerful men used reassurance strategically, like a negotiation tactic disguised as kindness. But he hadn't sounded manipulative. He'd sounded certain, which somehow unsettled her more. Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly. "You met the CEO tonight, didn't you?" Evelyn stared at him. "How do you know that?" "You have your I'm trying not to emotionally unravel in public face. That is not a thing. It's absolutely a thing. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her. God, she loved him. Ethan's expression softened immediately. Hey, he said more gently. Mom's okay. The knot in Evelyn's chest loosened slightly. Come on. He led her down the dim hospital corridor toward the observation wing. Outside the windows, rain slid down the city in silver streaks, while exhausted nurses moved between rooms beneath muted fluorescent lights. Their mother looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Evelyn hated hospitals for that reason. They reduced people, stripped away the illusion of strength. Her mother looked up as Evelyn entered and immediately frowned. You came straight from work. Hi to you too. You need sleep. You collapsed. I'm dramatic, her mother replied dismissively. Ethan snorted under his breath. Evelyn moved to the bedside carefully, trying not to show how relieved she actually felt seeing her conscious and alert. Did the doctor come back yet? She asked. Twice, her mother admitted reluctantly. Apparently, I'm no longer allowed to survive exclusively on caffeine and stubbornness. That's devastating news. A faint smile appeared, then faded. Her mother reached for Evelyn's hand gently. You're pale. Long night, Evelyn almost said. Instead, work was stressful. That company works you too hard. The irony nearly made her laugh again. If only her mother knew she'd just spent the last hour alone in a private office with one of the most powerful men in New York while discussing corporate fraud. Ethan leaned against the wall quietly. You should tell her about the billion-dollar disaster. Absolutely not. Their mother looked between them, immediately interested. The what? Nothing, Evelyn said quickly. It sounded expensive. It was very expensive. Evelyn shot Ethan a glare while he grinned unapologetically. For a few minutes, things felt almost normal. Then a doctor entered holding a tablet. And reality returned. Additional testing. Observation overnight. Insurance complications. Evelyn listened carefully while mentally recalculating bills in real time. Her mother noticed immediately. Honey, she said softly after the doctor left. Don't do that. Do what? The math. Evelyn looked away toward the rain-dark window. Too late. Her mother had always been unfairly perceptive. We'll figure it out, Evelyn said. We always do. But exhaustion hollowed the confidence out of the words. Silence settled briefly across the room. Then Ethan checked his phone and swore quietly. What? I'm supposed to be back for rounds in 20 minutes. Go, Evelyn said immediately. You sure? Yes. He hesitated, glancing between Evelyn and their mother. Then he stepped closer to Evelyn and lowered his voice. You really okay? No. Yes. Ethan clearly didn't believe her, but he kissed their mother's forehead anyway before leaving. The room became quieter after that. Monitors beeped softly. Rain tapped against glass. The city moved endlessly outside. Her mother watched her for a long moment. You met someone tonight. Evelyn stared at her in disbelief. What is wrong with all of you? A tired smile touched her mother's mouth. I'm your mother. That doesn't explain psychic abilities. You only get that defensive when something matters. Nothing matters, Evelyn nearly said automatically. Except survival. Bills. Keeping everything together. Instead, she sat carefully in the chair beside the bed. He's my CEO. Immediate understanding crossed her mother's face. That complicated, huh? You have no idea. Her mother studied her quietly. Is he cruel? The question caught Evelyn off guard. Not arrogant. Not difficult. Not intimidating. Cruel. And strangely, the answer came immediately. No. It unsettled her how certain she felt about that. Adrian Vale was many things. Cold, probably. Demanding, definitely. Dangerously intelligent, without question. But cruel? No. Her mother nodded slowly, as though filing that away somewhere important. Then her eyes narrowed slightly. He noticed you. Not a question this time. Evelyn looked down at her hands. At the faint ink smudge across her wrist from hours of rewriting financial projections. at the tremor she hadn't fully shaken since the boardroom. "He noticed my work," she corrected carefully. Her mother gave her a look that suggested she had once been young too. Before Evelyn could respond, her phone buzzed against the armrest beside her. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then the Manhattan area code caught her attention. Slowly, she answered. "Hello, Ms. Mercer." Low voice, controlled, immediate recognition. Every muscle in her body tightened instinctively. Adrian Vale. Across the room, her mother's eyebrows lifted dramatically. Evelyn stood immediately and stepped into the hallway. "Mr. Vale, I assume your mother is stable. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry. Just direct concern hidden beneath efficiency." "Yes," Evelyn answered quietly. "Thank you." A brief silence. Then, "Where are you?" She frowned slightly. "Midtown General." Another silence. This one shorter. "I sent revised instructions to legal and strategy," Adrian said. "But I need clarification on 2 of your retention projections before the shareholder call." Of course he did. It was nearly 2 in the morning. Normal people slept. Billionaires apparently reorganized financial warfare overnight. Evelyn leaned lightly against the corridor wall. "I can send you the data remotely." "I know." Something in his tone shifted subtly. Measured. "You left your laptop in my office." Her eyes widened. "Damn it." In her rush to leave. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "It's secure." Of course it was secure. It was Adrian Vale's office. Still, embarrassment climbed warm across her skin. "I'll come get it tomorrow." "You'll get it tonight." The calm certainty in his voice instantly sharpened her irritation. "I'm at the hospital. And Vale and Locke opens to shareholders in less than 5 hours. There it was. The reminder. The world he lived in. The scale he operated at. The expectation that everything else adjusted around it. Evelyn straightened slowly. "Are you asking me to leave my mother's hospital room for a shareholder meeting?" "No." A pause. Then, quieter. "I'm sending a car." Her grip tightened slightly on the phone. "You don't need to do that." "I know." Something about the answer unsettled her pulse. Not generosity exactly. Decision. As though once Adrian Vale chose a course of action, the rest of the world simply caught up afterward. Evelyn glanced through the glass toward her mother's room. Saw her mother pretending not to watch curiously. Saw the hospital bracelet around her wrist. Saw exhaustion pressing behind her own eyes. "I can take the subway." "At this hour?" Adrian asked mildly. Annoyance flickered hotter now because unfortunately he had a point. She hated when powerful men had points. "Mr. Vale." "Adrian." The interruption landed softly, dangerously softly. Silence stretched between them. Then he spoke again. "The car will arrive in 7 minutes, Evelyn." And before she could argue further, the line disconnected. She stared at the phone, slowly lowered it, then realized her heartbeat had become completely unreasonable. Behind her, a nurse walked past trying very hard not to eavesdrop. Inside the room, her mother looked openly delighted. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. This was a disaster. Chapter 4. The car waiting outside Midtown General looked expensive enough to alter tax brackets. Black exterior, tinted windows, driver in a charcoal suit standing beside the rear passenger door despite the rain. Evelyn stopped beneath the hospital awning with her coat pulled tightly around her and stared at it suspiciously. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "He noticed you." Absolutely not. This was logistics, efficiency, corporate crisis management from a man who probably viewed sleep as a negotiable inconvenience. Nothing more. Still, stepping toward the car felt strangely dangerous. The driver opened the door politely. "Ms. Mercer." She slid into the back seat reluctantly. Warm leather, muted lighting, the faint scent of cedar and expensive cologne lingering in the air. Her pulse betrayed her instantly, because of course the car smelled like him. Ridiculous. The partition remained lowered as the driver pulled smoothly into rain-slick Manhattan traffic. Evelyn looked down at her phone. 3 unread emails. 2 missed calls from Martin Green. 4 new messages in the Vale and Locke emergency strategy thread. The entire executive floor was spiraling. Meanwhile, Adrian Vale had somehow found time to send a car personally. That detail bothered her more than it should have. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. No, not unknown anymore. She answered carefully. Yes. Your brother stayed with your mother? Adrian. Again that immediate tightening low in her stomach. Yes. Traffic lights streaked across the window beside her in blurred red and gold. Good, he said simply. Evelyn frowned slightly. You seem unusually calm for someone facing a possible shareholder revolt. I don't find panic useful. You also don't seem surprised. A pause. Then, I learned a long time ago that people rarely become greedy suddenly. Something about the answer made her sit straighter. Not because of what he said. Because of how he said it. Controlled. Measured. Like experience had sharpened every edge off emotion until only precision remained. What happened to make you learn that? She asked before she could stop herself. Silence filled the line for 2 full seconds. Too personal. She recognized the boundary immediately. But then Adrian surprised her. My father trusted the wrong business partner. No elaboration. No self-pity. Just fact. Still, the quietness in his voice changed something. For the first time, she could almost picture him before the empire. Younger. Less untouchable. The image felt oddly intimate. Evelyn looked out at the rain-dark city. And now you trust nobody. Trust is expensive. You say that like it's a financial instrument. To people in my position, it is. There it was again. That impossible mix of honesty and restraint. No performance. No billionaire charm offensive. Just truth sharpened into practicality. It should have made him easier to dislike. Instead, dangerous. The car turned downtown toward the financial district. Evelyn rubbed tiredly beneath one eye. You know, normal CEOs delegate at 2 in the morning. You think I'm abnormal? I think you sent a luxury car to collect a junior analyst from a hospital in the middle of the night. A beat. Then, unexpectedly, you noticed the car was luxury. She almost smiled despite herself. You noticed I noticed. A soft exhale sounded across the line. Not laughter exactly. Closer than before, though. The realization unsettled her immediately. Because something was happening here beneath the surface of the conversation. Something subtle and magnetic and increasingly difficult to categorize professionally. Adrian spoke again before she could untangle the feeling. You challenged a board member tonight. He was wrong. You interrupted him. He was still wrong. This time she definitely heard amusement. Faint, controlled, but real. Evelyn stared at the rain-streaked skyline outside the window, feeling suddenly off balance. Men like Adrian Vale weren't supposed to be capable of warmth. Maybe calculated charm. Maybe charisma sharpened for negotiations. But not this. Not quiet interest hidden beneath composure. Not attention that felt precise enough to memorize things about her. The car slowed beneath the towering glass structure of Vale and Locke Technologies headquarters. Lights still blazed across multiple floors despite the hour. The building looked awake. Watching. Waiting. Mr. Vale. Adrian. Her heartbeat skipped once in pure annoyance. Mostly annoyance. You keep correcting me. Yes. Why? Silence. Then, because I dislike unnecessary distance. The answer hit harder than it should have. Evelyn looked away immediately toward the building entrance. Dangerous. Very dangerous. The car stopped. Before she could move, the rear passenger door opened from outside. Adrian Vale stood there himself. Rain moved behind him in silver sheets beneath the city lights. His suit jacket was gone now, white shirt sleeves rolled once at the forearms, dark hair slightly disordered for the first time all night. He looked less polished this way. Unfortunately, that made him more attractive. Evelyn stepped out slowly, trying not to react to the fact that the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company had just opened a car door for her personally at 2:30 in the morning. You didn't need to come downstairs, she said. I know. Again with that answer, as if necessity and desire were entirely separate categories to him. The lobby security staff suddenly became extremely interested in their computer screens. Smart people. Rain thundered softly against the glass walls as Adrian fell into step beside her toward the private elevators. "You look exhausted," he observed. "So do you. I function well without sleep." "That sounds unhealthy." "You've said that twice now." "Because it keeps being true." The elevator doors slid open immediately for them. Inside, soft lighting reflected against dark steel walls. Too intimate. Again. Evelyn stepped inside first this time. Adrian followed. The doors closed quietly, and suddenly she became intensely aware that they were alone together again. No boardroom, no executives, no distractions. Just the low hum of the elevator ascending through 50 stories of silence. Her laptop sat tucked beneath Adrian's arm. He handed it to her without speaking. Their fingers brushed briefly. Tiny thing, barely contact. Still, heat flashed unexpectedly up her wrist. Evelyn pulled back too quickly. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. His gaze lowered fractionally toward her hand before lifting again to her face. Not flirtation. Worse, awareness. The elevator continued upward. "You should be angry with me," she said suddenly, needing to break the tension somehow. "Why? I created a crisis." "No," Adrian said calmly. "You exposed one." The distinction settled heavily between them. Evelyn looked down at the closed laptop in her hands. "People are going to lose their jobs tomorrow." "Yes." No hesitation. No corporate euphemisms. Just truth. She swallowed slightly. "Does that ever bother you?" Adrian went still beside her. The city lights reflected sharply across the steel walls around them. Then he answered quietly, "Every decision at this level hurts someone eventually." The honesty of it stole her next response completely. Not defensive. Not performative. Just tired. For one impossible second, she glimpsed the man beneath the reputation. The weight beneath the control. And suddenly she understood something dangerous. Adrian Vale was lonely. Not alone. Lonely. The elevator slowed. The doors opened directly into the executive floor once more. But before either of them stepped out, Adrian spoke again. "Evelyn." She looked up. His gaze held hers steadily beneath the muted lights. "When this becomes public tomorrow, reporters will look for whoever uncovered the projections." Her stomach tightened. Of course they would. Corporate scandals always needed faces. "And?" she asked carefully. "And I'd prefer they didn't find you first." The words landed with quiet force. Protective. Controlled. Unmistakable. Evelyn's pulse turned traitorous again. Because powerful men had protected her before. Usually right before asking for something in return. But Adrian wasn't looking at her like that. No manipulation. No expectation. Just certainty. And somehow that was infinitely more dangerous.